Hello, and welcome to the Audiobooks channel, the place where stories find their voice. Now we're traveling somewhere far from wherever you're sitting right now, to the fjords of Norway, and to the warm, lamplit homes of two Indian families who built a new life beneath the northern lights. This is when winter waited for spring, a story about a friendship that began at 16, survived heartbreak, silence, and years of distance, and finally, quietly, became love. It's a story about two people learning the difference between being loved and being managed. About grandmothers who bless us in languages we're still learning. And about the particular kind of homesickness that belongs to anyone who has ever loved two countries at once. Get comfortable. Dim the lights if you can. Settle in, this one takes about 30 minutes, and I promise, every minute is worth it. Let's begin. Chapter 1, Roots and a Fjord. The bus climbed the last hairpin turn above fjord just as the clouds broke apart. And for one clear moment, 16-year-old Ananya Rao forgot to be nervous. Below her, the water lay so still and so blue it looked painted, ringed by mountains still wearing patches of old snow, like shawls thrown over their shoulders. She pressed her palm to the cold window and thought, not for the first time, that Norway saved its most breathtaking secrets for the places farthest from anywhere. She had packed and repacked her rucksack 4 times. Sleeping bag. Boots. Her scout uniform, ironed by her mother with more care than the occasion probably deserved. And tucked beneath it all, wrapped in a checked cloth napkin, a tin of theplos. Soft, spiced flatbreads her mother had fried at 5 that morning, murmuring to herself the whole time. "You will get tired of camp food by day 2, Sunita Rao had said, tucking the tin in with the finality of a woman who had lost this argument many times before, and won every single time anyway. Anna had rolled her eyes. She had also, secretly, been grateful. She was one of perhaps a dozen non-Norwegian faces among 400 teenagers gathering on that meadow, and she felt it the way you feel a held breath. Not painfully. Just constantly. A small awareness that never quite left her. Her name did not sit easily in Norwegian mouths. Her hair did not do what the wind did to everyone else's. She had learned, over 16 years, to carry these facts lightly, like stones smoothed by handling. It was during the chaos of tent assignments, ropes tangled, someone's dog escaping its lead, that she first noticed a boy standing quietly at the edge of it all. Watching everything with the unhurried attention of someone reading a map. Tall. Dark-haired. Holding his rucksack the exact way she was holding hers. Like a shield. "You're not lost," she said, walking up to him before she'd quite decided to. "You're just deciding where to stand." He looked at her, startled, and then something in his face loosened into a smile. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone doing the same thing." His name was Arjun Mehta, from a small town near Mold. And within the first 10 minutes, she learned that his mother had also packed him food his tentmates would find strange and wonderful, parathas, wrapped in foil gone slightly soft from the bus ride, and that his father ran an import shop that smelled, he said, like home and like nowhere at once. She laughed at that longer than the joke deserved. Because she understood it exactly. And being understood exactly was a rarer gift than either of them had words for yet. They were placed, by the particular mercy of a clipboard neither of them controlled, on the same 8-person team for the 2 weeks ahead. Anna led with the compass, fast and certain, the way she did most things. Arjun hung back at first, watching the terrain instead of the needle. The river's faster, he said, on the second morning, when she had them marching confidently toward a ridge that would have cost them an hour. If we follow the water down instead of the bearing across, we lose the climb. She stopped. Checked the map. He was right. How do you know that? I don't, really, he shrugged, a little embarrassed by his own certainty. I just look at where the water wants to go. It's usually smarter than we are. She followed him down to the river. They beat every other team back to camp that afternoon by 11 minutes. By the end of the first week, their team of 8 had become, without any of them announcing it, a small country of their own. Sigrid, with her booming laugh. Kavya, who could outsing anyone at the campfire. Quiet Lars, who fixed anything mechanical without being asked. And at the center of it, Anna and Arjun. She led with a fire she had never had to explain to anyone before. He steadied her without ever asking her to be smaller. It did not feel like romance. It felt like something rarer, and at 16, harder to name, the plain, unguarded relief of being fully seen. Chapter 2, A Promise Under the Northern Sky. On International Evening, Kavya pulled Anna into the firelight to dance to an old Bollywood wedding song. Within a minute, 400 Norwegian teenagers were clapping along, badly and enthusiastically, and Anna laughed so hard mid-spin that she nearly fell into the fire. Arjun caught her elbow without seeming to think about it, and didn't let go until she'd found her feet again. You could have just watched, she said afterward, breathless. I did watch, he said. I just didn't want you to fall while I was doing it. It was, in its quiet way, the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to her, though neither of them understood that yet. A few days later came the rope rescue simulation, the exercise every camper both dreaded and secretly wanted to be good at. When it was their turn, Anna felt the old fire rise in her chest, ready to shout orders, and then she looked at Arjun, already crouched at the anchor tree, hands moving with a calm she envied. Talk me through it, she said instead of leading, and for the first time in her life, she meant it as a compliment to herself, not a defeat. He did. Low and steady. They brought their casualty down in 6 minutes 40 seconds, a camp record that stood for 3 more years. That night, with the sky finally dark enough for stars, Anna found Arjun sitting slightly apart from the others. She sat beside him without asking. My grandmother says the stars look different depending on which country you're homesick for, she said. I never understood what she meant until this exact minute. He was quiet for a while. Do you feel homesick for India? Even though you've never really lived there? Sometimes. Is that stupid? No, he said, and something in his voice told her he'd thought about this longer than she had. I think we're homesick for a place that doesn't quite exist. Not really India. Not fully here either. Somewhere in between that nobody's built yet. She looked at him properly then, this quiet boy who had appeared out of a crowd of 400 and somehow understood, without being told, the exact shape of the ache she'd carried her whole life. I don't feel like that here, she said finally. With you. I just feel like myself. On the last night, torches lit along the shoreline, 400 voices singing the old scouting songs one final time. Anna and Arjun lingered by the dying fire a little longer than the others. No matter where life takes us, she said, let's never stop being friends. Arjun looked at her the way he'd looked at that compass bearing on the first morning, trusting it completely. Never, he said. They shook on it. 16 years old. Entirely certain that a promise made beside a fjord, under a sky just beginning to show its first faint threads of green and violet light, could outlast anything at all. Before the buses arrived at dawn, Anna pressed the empty Theplos tin into Arjun's hands. Return this to me in person one day, she said, half joking, half serious. Not by post. In person. That's the deal. He promised he would, though neither of them could have guessed exactly how many years, and how many detours through other people's lives, that promise would take to keep. Chapter 3, 2 Paths, 1 Sky. The years after camp moved the way rivers do, slowly at first, and then all at once. Anna finished school with grades that made her father quietly proud and her mother quietly terrified. The Norwegian armed forces did not, to Sunita Rao's mind, fit neatly into the safe, respectable life she'd crossed an ocean to give her daughter. But eventually, because her mother's fear had always been smaller than her love, she stopped asking and started packing extra snacks whenever Anna left for training. Anna's dedication carried her into a position in the administrative division of the Norwegian Defense Organization, not the frontline role she'd dreamed of at 16, but close enough to the uniform to still feel like keeping a promise to herself. Arjun's road bent differently, and it bent because it had to. When he was 19, his father's import shop, the one that had always smelled like home and nowhere at once, lost everything. Arjun, the eldest of three, watched his father's hands shake over unpaid invoices, and made a decision before anyone asked him to. He shelved the military dream without telling anyone how much it cost him. A letter of interest to a defense academy stayed folded in the bottom of a drawer for years, soft at the creases from being taken out and put back so many times. "You are sacrificing your whole life for us," his mother wept the day he told her. "I'm not sacrificing anything," Arjun told her, the first real lie he ever told his mother. By his late 20s, he'd become an airport operations manager at Oslo Airport. Good at it. Respected. Only very rarely, watching a military transport plane taxi past his office window at dawn, did something in his chest tighten in a way he never let show on his face. For a few years, he and Anna stayed close the way teenagers promise to and rarely manage: a birthday message, a photograph at Diwali, a joke forwarded at midnight. Somewhere around the time his father's shop closed and her training intensified, the gaps between messages widened. Neither of them decided to let it happen. It simply happened, the way distance always does when two lives fill up with everything except each other. One day, Anna looked at her phone and realized 6 months had passed since she'd heard from Arjun Mehta. She felt a small, unexplainable pang of loss for a friendship she still believed, somewhere underneath the silence, was simply resting. Not gone. Chapter 4: The Wrong Kind of Love. Anna met Rohan Varma at a Diwali Mela in Oslo, during her second year at university. 26, sharp-suited even at a festival, possessing the specific magnetic confidence of a man who had never once doubted he'd get what he wanted. "He's from such a good family," her mother said, pride unmistakable in her voice. "That boy asked about you 3 times before he even spoke to you directly. That's old-fashioned respect." Rohan courted her with a thoroughness that felt, at the time, like devotion. A proposal delivered on one knee during her own family's Diwali puja, the diya still burning on the windowsill. Her mother cried happy tears. Her father embraced Rohan like a son already. For the first year, Rohan was, in every visible way, exactly the husband he'd promised to be. It was only in small increments, so small Anna spent a long time believing she was imagining them, that something else began to surface underneath. A comment about laughing too loudly at dinner. A gentle suggestion that maybe she didn't need to work such long hours anymore. "I just worry about you," he'd say, whenever she mentioned meeting her old friends. "You know how people talk. A married woman should think about her reputation." She told herself this was simply what marriage looked like. Her mother's voice lived in the back of her mind: "Log kia kahenge, what will people say?" And Anna absorbed that warning without ever questioning whether it was protecting her, or slowly boxing her in. By the 3rd year, the boxes had corners she could feel in the dark. Rohan controlled the household finances entirely, framed as generosity, until she noticed she had to ask him for cash to buy her own mother a birthday gift. He mocked her old military dream in front of his friends, gently at first, then not gently at all, laughing in a way that made the room laugh with him, and left her sitting very still, smiling through the burn in her throat. She fought for the marriage the way she'd fought for every hard thing in her life. With discipline. With patience. She forgave apologies that arrived, always, right on the edge of an argument becoming unforgivable. She told no one, because admitting it out loud would make it real. The night it finally cracked open was an ordinary Tuesday. Her grandmother, her nanny, in Pune, had fallen and broken her hip. Anna's mother called in tears, asking if Anna could go, even for a few days. Anna went to tell Rohan she needed to book a flight, and he looked up from his laptop and said, without any particular cruelty, which was somehow worse than cruelty would have been, "You can't just leave whenever your family in India has a crisis. This is your home now. You need to decide where your priorities are." Anna stood in the doorway of their beautifully furnished living room, in the life everyone had told her was a triumph, and understood, quietly, completely, that she was not being loved. She was being managed. Chapter 5, Vows Without Music. Arjun's marriage began, as so many practical things do, around a kitchen table with 2 sets of parents and a great deal of tea. Divya Kulkarni's family had known the Mehtas for decades. There was no cruelty between Arjun and Divya, and no love either, only a shared roof, 2 beautiful children, and the particular loneliness of being cared for without being fully known. He became, by any outside measure, an exceptional father. He never missed a school concert, even the ones that ran 2 hours past his shift. He learned to braid his daughter Mira's hair for her dance recitals, standing awkwardly in the kitchen with a tutorial paused on his phone. Every Diwali, he strung the fairy lights himself and filled the diyas with oil, and felt, each year, a strange hollow space open exactly where joy should have been, because the woman lighting the lamps beside him was a wonderful mother and a good friend, and after 12 years, still a stranger in every way that mattered. There were no arguments in that house. That was, perhaps, the saddest fact of it. Arguments require 2 people who still expect something from each other. Once, late at night, scrolling through an old email account, he came across a message from years earlier. Anna, telling him about her first week of officer training, ending the note the way she always used to, with a small joke about missing his terrible orienteering skills that had somehow, impossibly, beaten every team at camp. He read it 3 times. He did not reply. But some quiet, honest part of him understood that even the memory of her steadiness still made something in his chest feel less alone than his own living room did. Chapter 6, When the Silence Breaks. The morning after Rohan told her she couldn't simply leave, Anna booked the flight to Pune anyway, paying with money from an account she'd quietly kept in her own name since her first paycheck, the one small rebellion she'd never told him about. It was Kavya, over coffee, who finally asked the question Anna had been avoiding. Anna. How long has difficult actually meant something worse than difficult? Once the question was asked out loud, the whole structure Anna had built to protect her marriage's reputation began, gently and then all at once, to come apart. Her grandmother, lying in a hospital bed with her hip in a cast and her spirit entirely undimmed, took one look at her granddaughter's face and said, in Marathi, before Anna had even sat down, "How long has it been since you actually laughed?" Anna cried for the first time in 3 years. When Anna finally told her everything, her grandmother was quiet for a long moment. Then she said the thing Anna would carry with her for the rest of her life. Beta, we crossed oceans so that you would never have to shrink yourself to survive. Love is not supposed to feel like a cage with good lighting. If it does, it is not love. It is only very well-dressed fear. Anna stayed in Pune 3 weeks. Walking the lanes her mother had grown up in. Laughing, actually laughing, for the first time in longer than she wanted to admit. She came home to Oslo with a decision already made. The divorce was not gentle. Some of the community whispered exactly as her mother had always feared they would. But Sunita Rao showed up on the day the papers were finalized with a tiffin of Anna's favorite food and a fierceness in her voice Anna had never heard before. Let them talk, her mother said. I would rather have a daughter who is alive inside than a daughter everyone admires from a distance. Anna rebuilt. With discipline first, and then, gradually, with joy returning like feeling to a numb limb. She learned that surviving something you were never meant to survive is its own kind of victory. Chapter 7, 20 Years, One Reunion. The letter arrived on Norwegian Scout Federation letterhead, inviting former campers to a 20th anniversary reunion, on the very shoreline where they'd once sung songs around a fire that felt, at the time, like it might burn forever. It was Sigrid who convinced Anna to go. Kavya's coming. Lars is coming with his ridiculous camper van. And, yes, I already checked. Arjun's coming too. Anna had not heard his name spoken aloud in years. He turned as though he'd felt her approach before he saw her, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. 20 years and 2 entire lives folding down, briefly, into the simple fact of 2 people finding each other again on the same stretch of fjord. You still stand at the edge of things, she said finally. Only until someone tells me where to stand, he said. They talked for 6 hours that first day. Anna told him about Rohan, about Pune, about the words that had rebuilt her. Arjun told her about Divya, about the shop that had closed, about being a father to 2 children he adored inside a marriage that had never once been unkind, and never once been alive. Neither of them cried, exactly. They simply sat with each other's stories the way they'd once trusted a shared compass bearing. Coffee the next week became dinner. Dinner became long walks along the Oslo harbor. For the first time in years, both of them found themselves laughing without first checking, out of long habit, whether laughter was something they were still allowed to have. Chapter 8, Letting Go, Softly. It was Divya who said it first, on an ordinary Thursday evening, over a pot of tea neither of them touched. Arjun. Have you ever, in 12 years, felt about me the way you're starting to feel about someone else right now? The silence that followed answered the question before he found the courage to. I have loved you the way you love a good friend you'd trust with your life, he said quietly. I don't think I've ever loved you the way marriage is supposed to mean. Divya nodded slowly, as though he had simply confirmed something she'd already grieved in private, long before this conversation began. Neither have I, she said. I don't think either of us deserves to spend the rest of our lives waiting for something that was never going to walk through that door. There was no shouting in the divorce that followed. Only 2 exhausted, decent people finally admitting, out loud and to each other, a truth they had both been carrying alone for over a decade. They remained devoted co-parents, birthdays celebrated together, school events attended side by side. And for the first time in over a decade, Arjun walked through his own front door each evening without bracing, out of long habit, for the particular silence of a house where 2 people were simply, politely, waiting out a life that had never quite belonged to either of them. Chapter 9, The Truth in the Room. 6 months later, the 5 of them gathered for dinner, and it was Sigrid, halfway through a second glass of wine, who finally set down her fork. Okay. I need to say this before I combust. Everyone here can see it except the 2 of you. At 16 you 2 built trust, she went on, gentler now. At 30-something, life broke both of you nearly in half. And now you're quietly rebuilding each other, phone call by phone call, dinner by dinner, and calling it friendship because friendship is safer to say out loud. The table went silent. Anna looked at Arjun. Arjun looked at Anna. What if this has never been just friendship? Anna said finally, so quietly it was almost a question to herself. They agreed to give it a year. No promises. Only honesty. They returned to fjord that spring and stood on the exact shoreline where 2 16-year-olds had once shaken hands over a promise neither of them had fully understood the weight of. That autumn, Anna invited Arjun's children to her apartment for Diwali, filling every windowsill with diyas the way her grandmother once had, teaching his daughter to draw a rangoli in chalk-bright color on the balcony floor. Arjun stood in the doorway, watching his children's faces glow orange in the candlelight, watching Anna move through her own home with an ease and joy he hadn't seen in her 6 months earlier, and felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for 20 years. When Anna finally called her nanny in Pune to tell her about the boy from scout camp who had somehow found his way back into her life, her grandmother was quiet for a long moment on the crackling line, and then said, with the particular satisfaction of a woman who had been right about something for 20 years without ever saying so, "Ah. So he finally caught up to you. I always wondered how long it would take that boy to be brave enough." Chapter 10, 2 Skies, 1 Home. The proposal happened in February, on a night so cold and clear that the aurora spilled across the whole sky above fjord in ribbons of green and violet, the same colors Anna remembered glimpsing over the water on their very last night at camp, 20 years and one entire lifetime ago. We've spent our whole lives, Arjun said, his breath fogging in the cold, looking for home in other people who were never quite it. What if home has always just been you? Anna did not hesitate. Not this time. Yes, she said, and then, laughing through sudden tears, obviously, yes. The wedding, the following winter, refused to choose between the two skies either of them had been raised under, and instead simply held both. Mendi the night before, with even Divya coming to help, saying she wanted to be part of the good ending, not just the ending I was part of. Haldi at dawn in the garden behind a small wooden church. And in that church overlooking the fjord, surrounded by family and the small, fierce circle of friends who had loved them steadily since they were 16, Nanny stood between them and tied their hands together with a length of red thread, murmuring a blessing half in Marathi and half in careful, practiced Norwegian. May your home always have room for both your skies, she said. And outside the church windows, the season's first snow began, quietly, to fall. There were no grand promises beyond the one they'd already made, twice now, 20 years apart. Only this: whatever season came next, they would walk through it together, carrying both their countries lightly, the way you carry something you have finally, after a whole lifetime of searching, learned to call home. That evening, Arjun reached into his coat pocket and pressed something small and battered into Anna's hands. The old Theplos tin. Dented at one corner. Carried faithfully through 20 years and 2 marriages and 100 small griefs neither of them had known how to name at the time. You told me to return this in person, he said. I know it took me a while. Anna turned it over in her hands, laughing through fresh tears under a sky that had finally, gently, stopped snowing. Some promises, it turns out, don't need daily proof to stay true. They only need, eventually, the right season, and the right person, to be kept in. And that's where we leave Anna and Arjun, hand in hand, snow settling in her dark hair, 2 entire homelands folded gently into one life. This story was, at its heart, about the particular homesickness of belonging to 2 places at once, and the relief of finally finding someone who understands that ache without needing it explained. It was also, unavoidably, about the difference between being loved and being managed, and about how long it can take, even for the strongest among us, to tell the two apart. If any part of Anna's story felt familiar to you tonight, please remember what her grandmother said: love is not supposed to feel like a cage with good lighting. You deserve a home, not a performance of one. To every listener who has ever felt caught between 2 homelands, 2 languages, or 2 versions of themselves, this story was told with you in mind. To the grandmothers, the nannies and ajis and bestimers, who fold their wisdom into recipes and blessings and never once make a fuss about how much they've taught us, thank you. And to anyone still waiting for their own right season, may it find you exactly when you're ready for it. Thank you for spending this story and with Anna, Arjun, Nanny, and their whole loud, loving, mismatched circle of friends who never stopped believing in them, even when they had stopped believing in themselves. If this story found you at the right moment, leave a comment and tell us which chapter stayed with you most, and if you'd like more stories like this one, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.